They threw me out because they thought I was poor. I didn't argue. I didn't explain. I packed my bags and left quietly. A week later, my bank called me because my daughter-in-law tried to take control of my money. Was I cruel for cutting them off? Or finally honest? Like, comment, and stay with me. I didn't leave my son's house because I was angry. I left because his wife finally said it out loud. "Your poor mother is embarrassing us. I don't want her living here anymore." She said it casually, like she was talking about an old couch. I was standing in the hallway, holding my grandson's bottle, still warm from the sink. I didn't argue. I didn't defend myself. I just nodded and said, "Okay." That seemed to confuse her. My son wasn't home yet. He was always working late when things got uncomfortable. So I went into the small guest room they'd given me, opened my old suitcase, and started folding my clothes. Quietly. I didn't cry. Not yet. I heard her on the phone later, laughing, telling someone she'd finally fixed the situation, that I'd probably end up with relatives or some government place. She assumed I had no options. Everyone did. Because I wore old sweaters, because I drove a 12-year-old Honda, because I never talked about money. They thought I was poor. They were very confident about that. What they didn't know was why I stayed quiet, or what I was about to do once I walked out that door. They thought leaving meant losing. They were wrong. When I first moved in, I told myself it was temporary. My son said they needed help with the baby. His wife said she was overwhelmed. I believed them. I always believed my son. I woke up before everyone else, made breakfast, folded laundry, watched the baby while they slept. I took phone calls in whispers so I wouldn't disturb anyone. No one asked how I was doing. Little things started changing. Chore lists taped to the fridge, comments about my clothes when guests came over, hints that I should stay out of sight when her friends visited. I adjusted. I always had. At night, I sat on the edge of the bed scrolling photos of my old house, the quiet kitchen, the small garden. I told myself I was being useful here, that this was what mothers did, but usefulness slowly turned into invisibility. They talked about money constantly, complained about bills, new furniture arrived, designer bags, weekend trips, yet somehow my thrift was the embarrassment. I paid for my own groceries, never asked for anything. Still, she called me a burden. Still, my son said nothing, and that silence hurt more than her words ever could. I realized then I wasn't family, I was help. The night it broke, her sister was over. I was in the kitchen rinsing bottles when I heard my name, not whispered, disgust. "She's basically living off you," her sister said. "And those clothes? It's sad." My daughter-in-law laughed. "Jason feels guilty. He thinks she has nothing." Nothing. That word landed hard. I stepped into the room. They both froze. That's when she straightened her shoulders and said it again, louder, clearer. "You're embarrassing us. People think we can't afford help. I don't want my child growing up around that." Around me. She didn't yell. She didn't need to. She had already decided. When my son came home later, I told him calmly. He rubbed his face, tired. "She didn't mean it like that," he said. Then quieter, "Maybe it's better if you had your own place." That was it. No apology, no defense. I packed that night, carried my suitcase past the nursery, past my grandson's crib. No one followed me. As I drove away, I realized something painful and freeing at the same time. They weren't pushing me out. They were revealing who they were, and I finally stopped protecting their illusion. I parked in my driveway and sat there with the engine running. The house was dark, quiet, still mine. Inside, I made tea and sat at the kitchen table where I'd paid bills for decades, where I'd planned my life carefully, quietly. I thought about my son at 12, his first job, his college tuition, all the things I'd given without ever keeping score. Part of me wanted to call him, fix it, smooth it over. But another part, older, steadier, asked a harder question. Why was I trying so hard to be accepted by people who didn't respect me? I opened my laptop, logged into accounts I'd built over years of discipline, savings, investments, property paperwork. I wasn't rich by accident. I wasn't poor either. I realized my silence had allowed them to create a story about me, one that made their behavior easier to justify. So I made a decision. I wouldn't confront them. I wouldn't explain myself. I would simply stop being available. The next morning, I called my lawyer, not to punish anyone, to protect myself. And that's when the balance quietly shifted. I changed my estate plan first, removed assumptions, added boundaries. Then I changed my phone habits, fewer answers, short replies, no emotional explanations. That's when my son noticed. He called, asked where I was staying, sounded worried. I said I was fine. Then came the invitation, dinner, apologies, let's move forward. I declined. A few days later, something strange happened. My bank flagged an attempted access. Not my son, his wife. She'd claimed I was confused, that she needed control for my own good. That told me everything. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't threaten. I documented. I locked things down. When my son finally came over, confused and shaken, I didn't lecture him. I showed him facts. And then I said the hardest thing I've ever said to my child. I love you, but I will not live where I'm treated as less. He cried. I didn't, because by then I wasn't angry. I was done. Justice doesn't always shout. Sometimes it closes a door. Life got quieter after that, healthier. My son filed for separation months later, not because I pushed him, because the truth finally caught up. I see my grandson now, on my terms, in my home, with respect. I didn't take revenge. I didn't humiliate anyone. I simply removed access, and that changed everything. Here's what I learned. Silence is often misunderstood as weakness. Being underestimated is dangerous for the people doing the underestimating, and family love does not require self-erasure. Walking away isn't failure. Sometimes it's the first act of self-respect. So tell me, was I wrong for leaving quietly? Would you have stayed for family or chosen dignity? If this story spoke to you, share your thoughts below, and subscribe if you believe strength doesn't need to be loud.